It was a normal January morning. The airs were chilly, still cold from the winter season of December. January 22nd, 1993 was a normal day like any other, filled with a bleary-eyed public waking up on their Friday morning, looking forward to finishing the work week and heading into the weekend, as well as looking forward to their incoming paychecks. The long trek cash and transit guards had to endure meant waking up and starting work at the early hours of the day. Mayer had shown up to work without his usual car, citing it having a breakdown and as a result having to take a taxi. Peter Bunn, the other security guard working as Mayer's partner, accepted Mayer's excuse as they got ready to get into the truck and begin their route. As one of the stops on the cash route was the Ipswich post office, there was a lot more cash in the van than usual, making it particularly dangerous for Bunn and Mayer, as the likelihood of attacks on transit vans had gone up in the preceding years before 1993. Bunn had had a few stick-ups in the past, but he was used to it after being a security guard for a few decades. Mayer, on the other hand, had only been at Securigal for 6 months, still thought of as a new boy by the other workers. As a result of Mayer's lack of experience, both in general and on this particular route, Bunn was the legman, him being the one to take the cash boxes and deliver them to each stop, with Mayer waiting at the wheel and transporting the two around. Their first stop was Lloyd's Bank in Felixstowe on Hamilton Road. Mayer pulled up to the bank, and after a short delay waiting for the bank to affirm that they could enter with the money, Bunn hopped out, taking the first cash box into the bank. Mayer's job was to stay outside the rest of the money whilst Bunn took in cash boxes one at a time, as indicated by protocol, each containing £25,000. Bunn made sure to make chat with the staff in the bank, exchanging pleasantries with them whilst the money was handled, before heading out to either get another cash box or to move on to the next stop. But when Bunn went outside, he wasn't greeted with the van. What was left was an empty space where the van should have been. At first, Bunn didn't want to assume the worst. Often traffic wardens had warned the vans to park somewhere different, so sometimes drivers would drive the van to a spot a street or two away to not get a ticket. Bunn assumed this was the case, so he tried radioing Mayer with his portable radio. No response. This was normal for Bunn, as the radio signal was patchy at best, so it wasn't a surprise that Mayer wasn't answering. After a while of no response from Mayer, Bunn began to panic that Mayer had been kidnapped or had been threatened by an unknown party, so he went into the bank and the nearest control centre for Securical was contacted. This resulted in the police being called, and they were soon on the case, looking for the van and Eddie Mayer himself. As the confusion settled in, Mayer was using this time to his advantage. It is presumed he drove this route to Micklegate Road, in which he then began swiftly unloading the cash with an accomplice into a Toyota Previn space cruiser, his first getaway vehicle. Almost all of the cash was unloaded into the cruiser, a whopping £1.17 million, with only £2,100 in change left inside of the van. After the unloading had finished, Mayer and his accomplice or accomplices loaded into the cruiser and headed to Landguard Fort, where they had Mayer's Opel Ascona parked ready to load the money into. Mayer had earlier fabricated the lie to Bunn that his car had broken down, and this was likely to cover the fact that he had hidden the Opel Ascona nearby for use in the theft. One of many hints that the theft was carefully planned out beforehand. The route was discreet, and Mayer didn't draw any attention to his vehicles. Maintaining a cool persona and calmly driving around in his getaway vehicle, the cruiser blended with the other nearby traffic, making the sight of Mayer and the cash something unremarkable for the average civilian hanging around Felixstowe. This would later prove a problem when the police looked for witnesses to help them find Mayer's whereabouts. Mayer pulled up to the Landguard Fort car park, a viewing location that offered a view of the nearby beach as well as the port of Felixstowe. He again unloaded the money into another getaway vehicle, this time his Opel Ascona. It is likely that he decided to use 2 getaway vehicles to draw attention away from police searches. From there, it is relatively unknown what Mayer did. He likely drove away to somewhere nearby, but not in Felixstowe, such as a neighbouring village or town, and laid low for a while. For now, he had gotten away with it, but the police search was only beginning. Luck, it had seemed, was on Eddie's side. It was the perfect theft. Witnesses were divided over what exactly happened, as the theft had occurred in plain sight. By the end of the 22nd, police were still unsure whether or not Mayer was the prime suspect, as there was still the possibility of him being harmed in some way or being held ransom, but as time went on, that possibility shrunk. The next day, police issued a statement identifying the prime suspect as Eddie Mayer, something that the local newspapers were quick to report and run headlines on. This was the scoop of the decade, as in sleepy Suffolk, such high-scale crimes rarely happen. Possibly the only case that can compare to this is the Steve Wright murders from 2006, and those happened over a decade later. A reward was offered up by Securical for any information that could provide police knowledge on Mayer's whereabouts, but the £50,000 reward was nothing compared to what Mayer's accomplices had likely gleaned from the over £1 million in Great British pounds. It is not unlikely that Mayer and his accomplices silenced those that could have been illustrated to the police by buying them off. Media coverage began to extend, going to Mayer's family. The media, desperate for interviews, camped out around the houses of Mayer's immediate family. The press pack were hungry wolves, and the Mayer theft was a big stake dangled in their faces, just out of reach. Margaret Francis, Eddie's sister, was quoted defending Mayer in the press, as was his brother Michael. They both made out Eddie to be a sympathetic figure, something which the public was beginning to believe too. Mayer was becoming something of a folk hero, being seen as someone that defied the establishment and took money from those that didn't need it. He was becoming somewhat of a hero in the little county of Suffolk.
You know, people look at me as like a hero, really, don't they?
As the media coverage continued, so did the police investigation. The press releases released by Suffolk Police provided the press with a steady stream of information, a mutually beneficial agreement, allowing the media to get their money from interested laymen, and allowing the police to appeal far and wide for any witnesses to come forward.
With the media and police, there's definitely mutual benefits.
As long as the Mayer case was in the press, the police would have a chance of finding the man that vanished with £1.17 million. Alas, even the doubling of the reward did nothing to aid the police in their investigations. Key witnesses refused to come forward, though police were making do with what they had. Witnesses weren't entirely reliable, but they gave the police a lot of contribution towards their investigations. Almost 200 witnesses were interviewed, and information from their investigations even prompted the lead investigators to take a trip to Cyprus for what they presumed was their man. Mayer was connected with Cyprus, having served tours there while in the army. Loose connections provided the media with their own material. Mayer was accused of being in a gang, being a plant, being a trained locksmith, a trained pilot, and more. Some of these claims had little substantiation, yet still made the front pages of local newspapers. People were hungry for Fast Eddie, and the press were providing. Even a nationwide appeal on BBC's Crime Watch for witnesses to help find Eddie Mayer didn't do much. At this point, around February, officers were beginning to lose hope of catching Fast Eddie. The investigation team was cut down to around 30 officers, with no new info being discovered by the team. The murder of an 82-year-old widow in Martlesham diverted some of the police attention, making the Mayer theft even less of a priority. Buzz for Fast Eddie had finally begun to dwindle. Possibly sensing the lowered attention around him, Eddie Mayer left the country and headed to America at the end of February. He used his brother's passport, Michael Mayer, who shared a striking resemblance to him, and went through security as normal. It's unknown how he got through security without being flagged, but it seems that Fast Eddie was still on his lucky streak. At the same time, police had racked up a total of 450 people questioned in 15 countries, with 650 lines of inquiry followed, 250 witnesses interviewed and 30 detectives still working on the case. Inquiries were still continuing, but police were running out of leads to look at. By March, police were cutting down the team even further. A press release came out addressing the fact that the team would be cut down in the following months. This was no doubt due to the dwindling leads of the case, which I previously mentioned. Mayer had beaten the system, and he'd gotten away scot-free. In April, Mayer and his girlfriend Debbie had assumed fake identities. Mayer was known as Stephen King, a name he had shared with a famous American author, and Debbie had the name of Barbara Anthony, though she preferred to be called Sarah as she didn't want Americans nicknaming her Barbie. These identities were secured by an unknown party, who bribed 2 North London citizens to allow their passports to be used by Mayer and Debbie. They were paid £50 for the passports. At first, Mayer and his family stayed in Houston, Texas. Mayer was incredibly nervous, staying in his hotel room for the whole duration of the 3 months they spent there. Once they decided to move, though, Mayer wasted no time buying a lavish home in Woodland Park, Colorado for $119,000, £80,000, in an area with open flats and forests surrounding the house, in July of 1993. As Mayer and Debbie started to settle down, so did the investigation looking for them. That same month, there was a murder of a 26-year-old woman in Ipswich. This diverted even more attention away from the case. To add to this, D.I.P. Noble, a lead investigator on the case, sadly passed away a few months later. It seemed the case was finally petering out. Meanwhile, Mayer was moving all around the country. After the Woodland Park house, Mayer moved into a ranch of his own creation on 80 acres of land he also bought, accumulating to around $92,000. This allowed the family the perfect retreat from curious eyes. After selling the ranch for a neat price, Mayer decided to move his family into a New Hampshire house in 1996. Mayer had previously holidayed here with Debbie in 1989, so they already had fond memories of the location. This was the last time Mayer would own a property whilst in the USA. During the following years after 1993, there were around 20 reported sightings of Mayer. Though both police and media attention had shifted and almost died, it seemed people were still aware of Eddie Mayer, and his face had been welded into the minds of the British nation. Mayer had something of a reputation, and the more years he remained uncaught, the more the public had begun to respect him as an anti-heroic, or even heroic, figure. 1997, Debbie, still on the run in the USA, gave birth to another baby boy, named Mark King. This extended Mayer's family, likely causing him problems money-wise. It was speculated in the media that Mayer's money would begin to run out around 1997, and this was seemingly true. Though Mayer and his family had spent the first years of their lives on the run, living in expensive and reclusive places, Mayer was forced to find work in 1998, indicating his personal finances were running low. At the same time, press attention was being drawn Mayer's way again. Police confirmed Mayer had fled to the USA with his family at the beginning of 1998 in a press release, renewing public interest in finding out the whereabouts of Fast Eddie in an eager bid to find out more about the money and what happened with the theft. This information made front pages, though when reporters went to find out more information on the topic, they found their search impeded by the stumbling block of time. As police had withheld the release for a few years, any witnesses that would be demonstrable to helping reporters find the location of Debbie, who had been proven to have booked a hotel in Boston, Massachusetts days before Mayer's theft, was long forgotten.
One of my colleagues actually got sent out there to see if he could follow the trial, but it didn't lead anywhere, to be fair, in the end, because obviously he'd already moved on. I mean, we're talking about 5 years after.
Though the press tried, they were following cold leads. The press was hungry for more, but they couldn't find it. Mayer's lucky streak was continuing to hold up even years later. Before the turn of the century, Mayer's family life was taking a big turn. Debbie's fake passport had run out, which meant she no longer could do anything that required her identity. She was from this point secluded, forced to remain in the house and do jobs, and so could not also take on a job to provide the family help with the workload of the bills to pay. Mayer's fake passport had also run out, meaning he had begun to use his brother's identity to work in the USA instead. His brother, from an American marriage, had a green card. For all intents and purposes, Eddie Mayer was now Michael Mayer. Years went by. Mayer and his family grew up, and he continued to provide for them as best as he could, though he had to take out a multitude of debts to keep up his family's lifestyle. Providing for a wife and 2 children could not have been cheap, and by this point it is likely that the share Mayer took from the theft had all but run out. Mayer was living off of his own back, and the rest of his family was relying on him for support. He must have been constantly checking his own back, becoming paranoid that someone somewhere would recognise his face and call the police on him. His identity as Michael Mayer made it even likelier that people would connect the dots, and he was essentially hiding in plain sight. By the end of 2010, Mayer had all but lost all of his finances. He was forced to declare himself bankrupt as Michael Mayer. Mayer was likely becoming stressed from his inability to keep up with the financial demands of his life in the USA. In September 2011, Lee King, aged around 21, bought a scratch card. He had won $100,000 in a feat of great luck. However, like his father before him, he was not good at keeping the money and using it conservatively. The money had quickly vanished in around 1 or 2 months. Lee King's name still to this day appears on the website for the Missouri Lottery. With the money brought a romantic prospect. Jessica, the girlfriend of one of Lee's friends, had taken an interest in Lee. She left Lee's friend to get together with Lee in October of 2011, moving in together after only a couple of dates. Jessica was madly in love, even getting Lee's fake surname of King tattooed on her wrist. After only a week together, Jessica and Lee decided to get married in Arkansas. Mayer and Debbie attended their wedding and seemed very happy in the photos, though their life was anything but. At the tail end of 2011, Lee had gotten heavily drunk on Boxing Day. Shockingly, Lee revealed all about his father's criminal past as a wanted thief in the UK and the run in America. Jessica didn't believe his claim, with her attributing it to Lee being too drunk and having quite an imagination. She helped him home and put him to bed. The next day, Jessica, curious about the claim about Lee's father being a wanted criminal in the UK, asked him about what he had said the previous night. Lee appeared quite surprised and desperately asked Jessica to keep it a secret. Though Jessica still didn't trust Lee, his reaction made her think about what he had said. She did a quick Google search of Eddie Mayer and discovered that what Lee was saying was true. The photos of Eddie Mayer resembled Lee's father, and she became scared and sickened by what she was reading. The day after finding out the shocking identity of her father-in-law, Jessica was invited to Mayer's current rented place in Ozark, Missouri, a city he had been living in for a few years by this point. Lee had told Mayer that Jessica knew all about him, prompting Mayer to threaten to kill Jessica if she said anything. Jessica feared for her life, and was in a very precarious position in which there was no easy way out. It was at this point where Jessica seriously considered the prospect of turning Mayer in. 5 weeks later, at the beginning of February 2012, Jessica had spent this time deciding whether or not to turn Mayer into the local police. On the 6th of February, Jessica told Lee she was using the car for errands, but instead she took the car to the Ozark PD and desperately told an officer about Mayer's real identity. Later in the day, once she told Lee about what she had done, they had an intense argument, prompting Jessica to call the police on him, and Lee being arrested on a domestic violence charge. Mayer was forced to travel to bail Lee out, while there also complaining about having his gun stolen by Jessica. This would turn out to be a mistake, as it would be used against him by the police. Surprisingly, Mayer was told by officers that they were aware of his true identity but couldn't arrest him yet. This was intended to bait him into doing something that would implicate him, but was a move that was later described as misguided by British prosecutors. Mayer left the station in an irate mood, threatening whoever dobbed him into his son Lee. Once Mayer returned home, he and his family quickly packed their bags and were running away once again, this time to a local motel. But this decision didn't last long. After a night of contemplation, Mayer decided to return home. Perhaps sensing that his time was up, he was facing whatever waited for him back home. Mayer and his family went back to their rented place, and the police quickly showed up at his door, taking him in for questioning. Mayer asserted that he was Michael Mayer, but Debbie, perhaps herself tired of being on the run, admitted to police Mayer's true identity. It would seem Mayer's time on the run had ended, not with a bang, but with a puff of smoke.